The girl who wore his name, the bracelet, was silver, tarnished nearly black, but when she shifted her wrist under the halogen lights of LaGuardia's executive terminal, 3 letters caught the glare. Etienne, part of a longer word, mostly obscured by grime and the fraying friendship bracelet threads wound around it. But Henry Castellan saw those 3 letters clearly, impossibly, and the polishing cloth froze in her small hands. "Where did you get that?" he asked, his voice strange in his own ears. The girl, maybe 11, 12 at most, wearing a coat that had been through too many winters and sneakers held together with duct tape, looked up sharply, defensive. Her face was dark brown, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, her eyes older than they should have been. "It's mine," she said quickly. "I didn't steal it." That was 6 hours before Henry Castellan's life divided into before and after. 6 hours before he would stand in a hospital corridor, shaking, while a doctor explained the implausible mathematics of coincidence and biology. But in that moment, in the private terminal where his jet was being fueled for the flight to Singapore, all Henry knew was that this child was polishing his Italian leather shoes with practiced efficiency, asking for nothing, and wearing something that shouldn't exist. "I'm not accusing you of anything," Henry said carefully. "I'm just asking." She returned to buffing his left shoe, small circular motions, professional. "My mom gave it to me. Before she died. It was hers." The terminal smelled like expensive coffee and jet fuel. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, December dusk was settling over New York, everything gray and gold. Henry's assistant had gone to confirm the flight plan. He was alone with this child who'd appeared beside his chair 15 minutes ago, asking quietly if she could shine his shoes. No charge, just practice, her voice careful and small. He'd said yes, because something about her stillness had reminded him of someone, though he couldn't say who. Now he watched her work and felt the world tipping sideways. "What was your mother's name?" he asked. The girl's hand stopped. She looked at him with sudden wariness, the expression of someone who had learned to recognize danger in questions. "Why? Please. It's important." A long pause. The distant sound of an announcement echoing through the main terminal. Finally, Lucia. Lucia Reyes. Henry's hands gripped the armrests of the leather chair. The name detonated in his chest like a shaped charge, precise and devastating. 15 years collapsed into nothing. He was 23 again, Harvard Medical School, a summer research program in the Bronx, a woman with laugh lines and brilliant hands who'd worked in the hospital cafeteria while studying for her nursing degree at night. 3 months that had felt like everything. Then his father's stroke, the emergency flight home to Connecticut, the family company in chaos, and when he'd returned to New York 6 weeks later, she was gone. No forwarding address. No return calls. He'd told himself she'd wanted it that way, that it had just been a summer thing, and eventually he'd let the memory calcify into something he didn't examine too closely. But he'd given her something before he left. A silver bracelet, expensive and foolish, engraved with his full name, Henry James Castellan. A promise he'd meant in the moment. "What was your mother's last name before Reyes?" Henry asked, his voice barely controlled. The girl's expression shuddered completely. She set down the polishing cloth, started to gather her small kit of supplies. "I should go. Wait. Please." Henry leaned forward, trying to gentle his intensity, trying not to scare her. "I knew a Lucia once. A long time ago. I'm just trying to understand if it's the same person. Why would you know my mom? We were friends. More than friends, briefly. This would have been about 15, 16 years ago." The girl studied him with those 2 old eyes, calculating something. Then, quietly, "She never told me who my father was. Just that he was a good man who didn't know I existed. That he had a different life, and she didn't want to mess it up." The terminal lights seemed to brighten and dim simultaneously. Henry couldn't breathe properly. Math scrolled through his head. 15 years, the timing, Lucia's disappearance. The bracelet on this girl's wrist. "What's her name?" he managed. "Avery. Avery Reyes." "How old are you, Avery?" 14. 15 in February. 15. Conceived in July, born in February. The summer he'd spent in the Bronx had been June through August. Henry's hands were shaking. He clasped them together, forcing steadiness. "Your mother," he said carefully. "When did she pass away?" Avery's jaw tightened. "Last year. Cancer. Fast kind. We didn't have good insurance." The last part came out flat, factual, the way children learn to discuss unbearable things. And since then, who've you been living with? Different places. Foster system mostly. I'm in a group home in Queens right now. It's okay. Better than some. She was folding the polishing cloth now, precise creases, keeping her hands busy. I come here sometimes after school. Practice, shoe shining. People traveling, they're usually in good moods. Sometimes they tip even when I say it's free. I'm saving for culinary school. My mom wanted me to go to college. Henry's heart was a damaged engine, misfiring. This child, his child, possibly, probably, the math wouldn't lie, was living in a group home, shining shoes in airports, surviving on the margins while he sat in private terminals on his way to board a jet worth $40 million. Avery, he said, and her name in his mouth felt like prophecy. I need you to do something for me. I need you to take a DNA test. Would you be willing to do that? She went very still. Why? Because I think I might be your father. The test took 3 days to process, 72 hours that Henry spent in a state of suspended animation, his Singapore trip canceled, his executive team quietly alarmed. He'd called his lawyer first, then a private DNA testing service that catered to people who needed discretion and speed. Avery had agreed with a wariness that broke his heart. She'd gone to the clinic accompanied by her caseworker, a tired woman named Ms. Chillen who'd asked pointed questions about Henry's intentions before allowing the cheek swap. If this is real, Ms. Chun had said in the clinic's beige waiting room, if you're actually her biological father, you understand there'll be a process? Home studies, background checks. The state doesn't just hand over children because someone shows up with money. I understand, Henry had said, though he didn't, not really. He understood pharmaceuticals. Castellan Biomedica had built its fortune on cardiac drugs and cancer treatments. He understood FDA approval processes and patent law and hostile takeover defenses. He didn't understand family court or foster systems or how you became a father to a teenager overnight. But he understood Avery's face when she'd told him about her mother dying. He understood the careful way she'd folded that polishing cloth. He understood that she carried his name on her wrist and asked for nothing. The results arrived on Thursday via encrypted email. Henry read them 3 times in his office, 41st floor of the Castellan building in Midtown, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a city where his daughter had been surviving alone. The terminology was precise. Probability of paternity, 99.97%. Conclusion: Henry James Castellan cannot be excluded as the biological father of Avery Lucia Reyes. He called his lawyer, then Ms. Chun. Then he sat in his office and cried for the first time since his father's funeral. Great wrenching sobs for Lucia, who'd carried the secret and raised their daughter alone and died without telling him. For Avery, who'd learned to shine shoes and navigate group homes. For 15 years of his daughter's life he'd missed. His assistant knocked hesitantly. Mr. Castellan? Miss Chin is here. And Avery. Henry stood, straightened his tie, wiped his face. Tried to organize himself into someone who could handle this. Failed. Gave up and opened the door anyway. Avery stood in his reception area looking impossibly small, wearing the same coat, the same duct-taped sneakers. She held a plastic shopping bag that seemed to contain everything she owned. Ms. Chun was beside her, professional and cautious. The results came back, Henry said unnecessarily. You saw them? We saw them, Ms. Chun confirmed. Avery just looked at him, her expression unreadable. Finally she said, so you're really my dad? Yes. The word was inadequate. Yes, I am. And Avery, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. If I'd known, I would've. He stopped, unsure how to finish. Would've what? Marry Lucia? Derailed his entire life? Maybe. Probably. He'd loved her, in the way 23-year-olds love, completely, and without strategy. My mom said you were good, Avery said quietly. She said you would have done the right thing if you knew, but she didn't want you to have to choose. She thought you'd pick her out of obligation and regret it later. A pause. She wanted me to have a mom who was chosen on purpose. The logic was devastating. Henry wanted to rage at Lucia's ghost for the choice, grieve for her impossible position, thank her for protecting him from a decision that would have torn him apart. Instead, he said, she was wrong about the regret part. You would never have been a regret. Ms. Chin cleared her throat. We should discuss next steps. Mr. Castellan, you've indicated you want to pursue custody? Full custody. Immediately. Whatever the process requires. It's not that simple. There'll be a home study, background checks, interviews. The state's priority is Avery's welfare, not expedience. I understand. How long? 3 to 6 months typically. Though given your resources and the biological connection, possibly faster. In the meantime, we can arrange increased visitation, weekend stays if they go well. Henry looked at Avery. What do you want? You get a say in this. She seemed surprised by the question. I want. She stopped, recalibrated. I want to know why you're doing this. Is it guilt? Obligation? You don't know me. I could be awful. You shine shoes for free in airports to practice a skill. You carry your mother's memory on your wrist. You survived a year in the system without becoming hard. Henry's voice cracked. You're my daughter. That's not obligation. That's everything. Something shifted in Avery's face, a hairline crack in the careful armor. The group home is loud, she said softly. There's 8 girls in my room. I can't sleep most nights. I keep my stuff in my bag because things get stolen. She stopped, visibly struggling. I'm really tired of being alone. Henry crossed the distance between them, slowly, giving her time to back away. She didn't. He knelt so they were eye level. You're not alone anymore. I can't fix the past, and I can't be perfect at this, but I promise you, you have a family now. You have me, and we're going to figure this out together. Avery's breath hitched. Then she was hugging him, fierce and desperate, the plastic bag crinkling between them. And Henry held his daughter for the first time in 15 years, held her while she shook with silent sobs, and made promises he intended to keep. Ms. Chun waited until they separated, then said gently, Avery, why don't you wait in the conference room? I need to discuss logistics with your father. Avery nodded, wiped her face, gathered her back. At the door she turned back. Thank you, she said to Henry, for believing me. About the bracelet. You could have just ignored me. Never, Henry said. Not possible. After she left, Miss Chen's expression softened slightly. You mean this? I can tell. But meaning it and doing it are different. She's been through trauma. She'll test you. Push boundaries. There'll be hard days. I know. Do you? You're a billionaire CEO. You're used to problems you can solve with resources. Parenting doesn't work that way. Then I'll learn. I'll hire therapists, take parenting classes, whatever it requires. I'll make mistakes and apologize and do better. Henry met her eyes. She's been surviving on scraps. I'm going to give her everything I have. Not just money, time, attention, presence. I'm going to show up. Ms. Chin studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, let's start the paperwork. The home study took 8 weeks, not 6 months. Henry's lawyers were very good at expediting processes, and the case was straightforward enough. Biological father, substantial resources, clear commitment. The social worker who conducted the interviews was a sharp-eyed woman named Mrs. Okonkwo, who didn't seem impressed by wealth, but was impressed by the shelf of parenting books Henry had purchased, the therapist he'd already lined up for Avery, and the way he spoke about his daughter with obvious, unguarded love. You're serious about this, she'd said during the final interview. More serious than anything in my life, Henry had replied. Custody was granted on a cold Wednesday in February, the week of Avery's 15th birthday. Henry had already prepared the guest room. Avery had chosen the paint color herself. A warm gray, she said, felt calm. They'd gone shopping together for furniture, clothes, everything she'd never had a chance to pick out before. Henry had learned his daughter loved cooking shows and hated math, that she was funny and guarded and brilliant, that she had nightmares about her mother and woke up afraid they'd separate her from Henry too. They can't, he told her every time. The law's clear now. You're mine. I'm yours. That's permanent. The birthday party was small. Just them, Mrs. Okonkwo, Ms. Chun, and a few kids from Avery's new school, a private academy where Henry had enrolled her with extensive tutoring support. He'd hired a personal chef to teach Avery cooking techniques as her birthday gift, a standing Saturday morning session. She'd cried when he told her, the good kind of crying. They were in the kitchen of Henry's, their home in Connecticut, a sprawling place Henry had bought years ago and barely lived in, now filled with Avery's presence. Her backpack on the counter, her shoes by the door, her laughter. The chef had made tres leches cake at Avery's request, her mother's favorite. 15 candles burned on top. Make a wish, Henry said. Avery closed her eyes, then opened them, looking at him. I don't need to. I already got what I wanted. After the party, after the guests left and the house quieted, Avery found Henry in his study. He was working on a grant proposal. Castellan Biomedica had established a new foundation in Lucia's name, funding nursing scholarships and cancer research. Avery had helped him design it. "Hey, Dad." She still sometimes hesitated on the word, but less each day. "Yeah. I was thinking about that day. At the airport. I almost didn't come talk to you. I thought you'd think I was begging or trying to scam you. I was just going to practice on empty chairs." She sat in the leather chair across from his desk. "What made you notice the bracelet?" Henry set down his pen. "Honestly, I don't know. The light hit it right, where I was paying attention in a way I usually don't. But I think—" He paused, choosing words carefully. "I think some part of me was looking for your mother. Had been for 15 years. And when I saw those letters, something recognized them. Do you think she wanted you to find me? Like, eventually? I think she wanted you to know who I was, when you were ready. Why else keep the bracelet? Why else tell you I was a good man?" Henry's voice roughened. "I think she was protecting us both, in the only way she knew how. And I think she'd be happy, seeing this. Seeing you safe and loved." Avery was quiet for a moment. Then, "I'm glad I shined her shoes that day. I'm glad I was brave." "Me too. And Avery, you're brave every day. You survived the year most people couldn't handle. You trusted me when you had every reason not to. You're letting me be your father even though I've been terrible at it sometimes. You're not terrible. You try really hard. It's kind of embarrassing how hard you try." But she was smiling. "I'm going to keep trying. For the rest of your life, probably. You're stuck with an overly invested dad who will absolutely embarrass you at graduations and college drop-offs, and your wedding someday." "Good," Avery said softly. "That sounds really good." Later, Henry stood in the doorway of Avery's room, watching her sleep. She'd fallen asleep with a cookbook on her chest, highlighter marks on pages of recipes she wanted to try. The silver bracelet lay on her nightstand, clean now, the full engraving visible. Henry James Castellan. He'd offered to have it resized, properly fitted. She'd said no. She liked it loose, the way her mother had worn it. A reminder of where she came from. Tomorrow Avery would wake up and complain about algebra, and Henry would drive her to school before heading to the office where he'd restructured his entire schedule around being present. They'd have dinner together, her cooking, his questionable assistance, and talk about their days. She'd do homework at the kitchen table while he reviewed contracts. They'd settle into the ordinary rhythms of family, hard-won and precious. But tonight, in the peaceful dark, Henry let himself marvel at the impossible mathematics that had brought them here. A bracelet worn for 15 years, a chance encounter in an airport, 3 letters catching light at exactly the right angle. The universe had no obligation to fairness, he knew that. He built a fortune on the random cruelty of disease, on the gap between what should be and what is. But sometimes, rarely, the math worked backward. Sometimes the lost thing found its way home. Sometimes a girl who'd learned to survive alone discovered she didn't have to anymore. Sometimes a man who'd thought he understood his life learned he'd been incomplete all along, waiting for a daughter he didn't know existed to teach him what mattered. Henry pulled Avery's door mostly closed, leaving it cracked the way she liked, never fully dark, never locked away. Down the hall, his own bedroom waited, but he paused in the hallway, looking at the photographs they'd started collecting. Avery's first day at new school, the two of them cooking together, a picture of Lucia he'd found in Avery's belongings and had framed with permission. A family assembled from fragments and faith. Outside, Connecticut winter settled deeper, but the house was warm. Inside these walls, a girl who'd shined shoes for practice slept safely, dreaming whatever 15-year-olds dreamed when they finally stopped being afraid. And her father, who'd been given an impossible gift, stood guard over that peace, grateful beyond words for the small miracle of recognition, for the courage of a girl who'd approached a stranger wearing his name on her wrist. The story could have ended differently. The bracelet unnoticed, the connection unmade, 2 lives continuing in separate darkness. But in this version, the one that mattered, love proved stronger than silence. Truth proved stronger than time. And a father and daughter found each other exactly when they both needed finding most. That, Henry thought, was enough. That was everything.